Hello there, future teacher. Welcome. In this video, we are going to talk about the different learning theories related to education. Let's start first with identifying the two types of theorists. We have the cognitivists and the behaviorists. So what do cognitivists study? They study an observable mental behavior. They know if someone have learned something, if there is a development in his or her cognitive ability. Let's try to apply it in a classroom setup. Let's say, for example, a teacher who just gave a lecture discussion to his or her student, and he gave essay as an assessment task to the students. So the teacher will be able to know if the learners have learned something from the topic, if they will be able to write something on their essay. If there's no answer, meaning to say there's no learning or there is no learning that have happened on the part of the student. So again, cognitivists study the unobservable mental activity, while the behaviorists, they study observable behaviors. They can tell if a person or a student have learned something through the behavior being elicited by that person or student. Let's say, for example, in PE. So the PE teacher will be able to tell if the students really understood the lesson, if the students will be able to execute the steps in dance or execute the proper posture in playing badminton, basketball, volleyball, so on and so forth. And so again, those are the types of theorists, the cognitivists and behaviorists. Now, let's have an overview of the learning theories that we are going to discuss in this video. We have the classical conditioning, followed by the connectionism, operant conditioning. Fourth is the social learning theory. The fifth one is the cognitive development theory. And the sixth one is constructivism. So classical conditioning, I believe you have already have a background about this one because you have tackled this during your PED 1 when you were still in first year. And so let's just have a review on what is classical conditioning all about. So classical conditioning is proposed by Ivan Petrovich Pavlov. And so he used a dog, a bell, and a food or meat during his experiment. So before conditioning, the unconditioned stimulus there is the meat. And so the automatic response of the dog is to salivate because he wants to eat the food. While the neutral stimulus is the bell. If the bell is being rung, there's no response from the dog. The dog will not salivate because he cannot eat the bell. And so this is the setup before conditioning. While during conditioning, Pavlov, during his experiment, he partnered the food and the bell. And so this now becomes, the food now becomes the conditioned stimulus. And since the dog is seeing the food at the same time while the bell is ringing, so the unconditioned response there is still the salivation. And, excuse me, after conditioning, the conditioned stimulus now is the bell. And so there's an association being formed with the dog that once there is a bell, there's always a food that comes with it. And so when Pavlov rang the bell, the conditioned response of the dog is to salivate with the bell, with the sight of the bell. And so this is the experiment again involved during the classical conditioning. So we have different examples here for the classical conditioning. So Fred has a fluffy down pillow with some of the down sticking out of the fabric. When he first tries out the pillow, a piece of down tickles his nose and he sneezes. This happens every time he goes to bed. Soon, he sneezes every time he lays down on any kind of pillow. So we can say that the floppy down pillow here is the unconditioned stimulus, and the unconditioned response is the sneezing. And then um and then the Fred has always experienced being like, having to sneeze. He always experienced sneezing because of the down that sticks out the pillow every time he goes to bed. And so the next time around, even though there is no down sticking out from the pillow, so there the conditioned response of Fred is to sneeze whenever he gets in touch with a pillow when he goes to bed. And another example here is number two. Oftentimes, physicians will give treatments that make people uncomfortable. What makes us uncomfortable? What makes us feel like, afraid of hospitals, of doctors, because we are afraid of needles or shots, maybe because when the first time that we experienced it, we felt like, pain, though there's great pain through the needle that's been injected to us. And so after this happens several times, people will begin feeling uncomfortable at the sight of anyone in a white lab coat. So, just a key point for classical conditioning, when we talk about classical conditioning, there is fear or excitement associated to a response of a person or someone. So that is classical conditioning. It should be repeated. Again, before a person or someone will be able to elicit a conditioned response, he or she should have experienced it several times before he will be able to have this so-called conditioned response. If it only happened once, then we cannot say that it will be developed into a conditioned response. So next, let's talk about Pavlov's other findings while experimenting with the dog, the bell, and the meat. And so he found out this so-called stimulus generalization. So one dog has learned to salivate at the sound of the bell, and it will salivate at the other similar sounds. As long as the sound is clink, 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 clink. And so the dog who hears the bell will salivate automatically. It doesn't matter if the bell is small or big, as long as it produces the same sound as the bell. And the second finding of Pavlov is extinction. If you stop pairing the bell with the food, salivation will eventually cease in response to the bell. So if you have already tried eliciting, or the person already elicited a conditioned response, say for example the conditioned response there is salivation, even though from the sound of the bell. If you have stopped pairing the meat and the bell a frequent of times, like you do it 5 times that there's bell only and there's no food being partnered with the bell, eventually there will become an extinction. The conditioned response, which is to salivate, will go away. And then, can it still be recovered? Yes, it can still be recovered, and that is the other finding of Pavlov, which is the spontaneous recovery. Extinguished responses can be recovered after an elapsed time, but will soon extinguish again if the dog is not presented with food. Let's say, for example, you have the dog. Let's go back to the dog. Okay, so there is an extinction that have happened, right? And so you want the dog to salivate again through the sight of the bell or through the sound of the bell. And so you once again partner the bell with the meat or the food. And so you do it again for 2 times or 3 times. But after that one, if you once again remove the food and the bell alone, you will ring the bell, and then you do it for like 5 times. Again, the conditioned response, which is to salivate, will become instinct once again. But when you do it, like you partner again, the bell and the food, so of course there will be spontaneous recovery. And there is also another finding of Pavlov, and this is the so-called discrimination. So the dog could learn to discriminate between similar bells and discern which bell would result in the presentation of food and which would not. Let's say, for example, now there are two types of bells, right? The bell that we use in like selling ice cream, and the bell that we use in the library, like it makes the sound of like ding or something like that. So the dog, or like the stimulus that has been used for the dog is the bell, which gives off the sound of cling, 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 cling. And then you use the bell which sounds like ding. And so the dog will be able to discriminate the sounds. He will not salivate with the sound of ding, but he will only salivate with the sound of cling, 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 cling. I hope you get my point. And now let's proceed to number 5, the fifth finding of Pavlov, the higher order conditioning. What do we mean by higher order conditioning? Because we can now use more than one like unconditioned stimulus. In his experiment, so he used a bell and a food, right? And then in higher order conditioning, he also tried using another unconditioned stimulus, which is the flashlight. While ringing the bell with the food, he also like used a flashlight. He turned on the flashlight, so there's light coming out of the flashlight. And so afterwards, after the experimentation during the conditioning, there's the bell and then the food and there's the flashlight. And then he tried to remove the bell. So there's only food and the flashlight. And the next time around, he removed the food, and with the light of the flashlight, the dog could still salivate. And so that is higher order conditioning. You may use more than one unconditioned stimulus. Okay? And let's proceed to connectionism. Connectionism theory proposed by Edward Lee Thorndike. And if Pavlov used a dog in his experiment, Thorndike used a cat in proving or like experimenting his stimulus response theory. So if you can see here in the picture, the cat is inside a cage and there's food outside the cage. And so Thorndike wanted to see if the cat realizes that once the cat pulls the string, the door will open, and the cat will be able to get out of the cage and eat the food. And so inshallah, there's the stimulus and the response. The stimulus there is the string that should be pulled by the cat, and the response will be the opening of the trap door. So if the trap door will be open, so he will be able to get his reward. And we can connect to this the primary laws of Thorndike. But before we proceed, by the way, so Thorndike's connectionism theory states that learning takes place when a strong connection or bond between stimulus and response is formed. Let's say, for example, in the experiment, the cat has repeatedly pulled the string, and so he will be repeatedly be able to eat the food, and so there will be a strong connection or strong bond between the stimulus and response. And let's continue this Thorndike's 3 primary laws. We have the law of effect, law of readiness, and law of exercise. So let's have first the law of effect. So law of effect states that a connection between a stimulus and response is strengthened when the consequence is positive. And when we say positive, of course, it pertains to rewards. And the connection between the stimulus and the response is weakened when the consequence is negative. And we can relate this to a classroom scenario wherein you will be given a reward by your teacher if you've got a perfect score in your quiz. Either he or she will give you an additional points, or he or she will exempt you from your exam just because you got a high score on your quiz. So what would be the effect for that? So of course you will try your best again the next time around to get a high score on your quiz. So that is the law of effect. A reward will have a positive effect on a behavior, and a consequence will have and also a negative effect on the behavior. So of course, if you receive a punishment or a consequence, there will be a high chance that you will not repeat a specific action, right? Now let's proceed to the law of exercise. Law of exercise states that the more a stimulus response bond is practiced, the stronger it will become. Let's say, for example, the first quiz that you got a high score and so you received a reward, and then the next time around the second quiz, you received again a high score and you received another reward. And once you have practiced or experienced that like more often, so of course, the stronger the bond will become. There is a law of exercise. And law of exercise, we can also relate it to a classroom setup where your teacher will allow you to repeat once again what she has just mentioned. Say, for example, the teacher will ask you, okay, class, what are the three primary laws proposed by Edward Lee Thorndike? And so you will repeat, you will enumerate the three primary laws: law of exercise, law of effect, and law of, what's the third law? Law of readiness. And so you will, the more the better your learning becomes, because you practice it. You practice it. You repeated it on your mind. And so there is a stronger bond that has formed. The more you become more familiar, or you will be able to memorize the three primary laws just because you repeated it in your minds. Okay? Law of exercise. And the next law, the third law, is the law of readiness. This states that the more readiness the learner has to respond to the stimulus, the stronger will be the bond between them. Let's say, for example, your teacher will, let you do some activities. The more ready you will become, right? In a classroom setup, before your teacher will proceed with the discussion, he or she will give you activities like he sets your mood. Okay, ready, set, go. So he sets your mood by giving you, by allowing you to exercise, to move around, to sing, to watch a video, and so your brains unconsciously gets ready for another lesson. So law of readiness. Again, let's repeat the three primary laws proposed by Thorndike: the law of effect, law of readiness, and law of exercise. Now let's proceed to the operant conditioning proposed by Burrhus Frederick Skinner, or Skinner. And so when we talk about operant conditioning, the very first thing that comes into our minds are the rewards and punishment for a specific behavior. And when we talk about reward, there are two types of rewards: the positive reinforcement and the negative reinforcement. When we say positive reinforcement, you will receive something. There will be added to you. Okay? Positive reinforcement. You will receive candy, money, any form of reward, additional grades, additional points, new clothes, new gadgets, so on and so forth. Positive reinforcement, you receive. Something will be added. Okay? And then when we say negative reinforcement, a burden will be taken away from you. So let's say, for example, household chores. No household chores. Because you did well on the exams, You got straight A's. You got 100% in all of your exams. So your parents or your teacher will reward you by not allowing you wash the dishes, cook in the house, clean the house. Because, oh yeah, this is your reward. You deserve to be pampered like a prince, like a princess. So a burden has been deducted from you, okay, has been taken away from you. Positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. And also there are two types of punishment. The positive punishment and negative punishment. When we say positive punishment, something will be added to you. Another burden will be added to you. More household chores. Okay? Because you got 0 in your quiz. You will do the dishes all week. You will clean the house the whole week. Okay? And when we say negative punishment, a privilege will be taken away from you. Let's say, for example, you got a low score in your exams, and so your parents will ground you. Your teachers will ground you. You are not allowed to get outside of the classroom. You are not allowed to go outside. You are not allowed to mingle with your friends over the weekend because you did something wrong. So positive reinforcement, a burden will be added for you. And for negative punishment, a privilege will be taken away from you. So again, there are two types of rewards and two types of punishment. Rewards, positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement, and punishment, positive punishment and negative punishment. Now let's proceed to the purposive behaviorism proposed by Edward Chase Tolman. When we say purposive behaviorism, a behavior is being done by a person because of a specific purpose. Purposive behaviorism. And there is another term coined for this purposive behaviorism, and this is the sign learning theory. Why sign learning theory? Let's say, for example, a student is very hardworking when it comes to his or her schoolworks. Why is that person or why is that student very hardworking? Because he has a goal. Okay? So there is a goal. Now, we will ask ourselves, what is the sign that a student has a goal? The sign there is that he or she comes to school early. He or she submits his requirements on time. So that is the sign learning theory. A learner or a person behaves because of his goal or his purpose. Again, Tolman's purposive behaviorism. This is also called as the sign learning theory. Purposive behaviorism believed that behavior was goal-driven rather than a simple biological response to a stimuli. Next, social learning theory proposed by Albert Bandura. And so Albert Bandura used a Bobo doll. He called his experiment as the Bobo doll experiment, where he used a Bobo doll. I don't know if you are familiar with a Bobo doll. It's a doll which stands, and when you push it back and forth, and so it just moves around. And so Albert Bandura involved a 1-year-old kid in his experiment. So what did Albert Bandura do? So he let the child watch someone punches the Bobo doll. So there is someone who is punching the Bobo doll, and this is what the 1-year-old kid sees every day. And so after how many weeks, after how many months of allowing that kid watch a, parang harsh behavior. And so Albert observed the behavior of the kid. And you know what the kid elicited? What kind of behavior the kid elicited? He also punched. He showed violence towards the Bobo doll. So that's the Bandura social learning theory. What the kid will see from his environment, he will copy it. He will imitate the behavior. Social learning theory of Bandura emphasizes the importance of observing and modeling the behaviors, attitudes, and emotional reactions of others. So what is the implication of that if we are going to become teachers in the future? So as teachers, we should become role models for our students. When we want them to be punctual, let us be punctual. Again, that's where we will relate the quote which says, walk your talk. If you want your students to behave something like this, then you should also behave like that. So walk your talk. And then there is a mnemonic for Albert Bandura's social learning theory. We have this AMOY. A stands for Albert, M stands for modeling, O for observing, and I for imitation. So AMOY. And this explains human behavior in terms of continuous reciprocal interaction between cognitive, behavioral, and environmental influences. So we cannot when a person behaves this way, we should think, we should like be able to consider that that specific behavior is actually affected by those people that surrounds that kid. Okay? That maybe that behavior he got it from his parents or from his friends or from the movies that he watched. So let's be very careful of what we show to our kids and what we allow them to watch over the internet. And next, we have these elements of observational learning. We have the attention, retention, motor reproduction, and motivation. So, of course, when someone is like showing a behavior, an action, the very first behavior that a learner or a student, the very first thing that a student will do is to pay attention to the action. Okay, he will observe. And then after observing, there will be retention. The student might, review it over and over again inside his mind. So there is retention. And then after that, after the student have memorized it on his or her way, there will be motor reproduction. He or she will now be able to execute the behavior himself or herself. And lastly, the motivation. Since he or she is already able to reproduce the action, he will now become motivated to repeat the action over and over again. Of course, depending if there is a reward and punishment. So it all goes back to the previous theories that we have discussed earlier, the classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and connectionism theory. So the theories are actually just interrelated with each other. Okay, so we have here factors, two critical factors that motivate students to learn. We have the so-called value and effort. If the students will be able to see the importance or the value of learning, of studying, of course they will do their best they will do their best everything just to complete the tasks. And then when we say effort, it's a two-way factor actually. If the students will see that their teachers are giving effort in educating them, of course the students will reciprocate by giving effort in doing the tasks as well. So value and effort, value how important it is for them, and effort, what are they gonna do just to achieve their goal. So factors that motivate students. Now let's proceed to the next learning theory, which is the cognitive development theory. And this theory is proposed by John William Fritz Piaget. John Piaget. And so John Piaget proposed four stages of cognitive development. Our brains, how it develops, it is divided into four stages. And the first stage would be the sensory motor stage from 0 to 2 years old. For this stage, it implies that it means that if we have kids in our home, if you will have kids in the future, the very best thing or learning material that you will provide to the kids is a material that will allow them to use their senses. Let's say, for example, you want them to learn what is rough and smooth. And so you provide them with a smooth, with a material with a smooth surface and a material with a rough surface. And so when you explain it to them, this is smooth and this is rough, because they learn best through their senses, the sensory motor stage. Next is the pre-operational stage from 2 to 7 years old. From 2 to 7 years old, if you are already done with the different stages of development of a human person, so pre-operational stage will include ages from toddlerhood, toddlerhood and the preschooler, according to Sandra. Toddlerhood and Sandra. And so, in that pre-operational stage, they will be able to develop concepts as they are very curious, they are on the questioning age, and that is also the time that is best for you to correct all of their misconceptions. Let's say, for example, the very common example for this, the bird and a plane. So when a kid sees a bird, so yeah, the bird flies, and so if something is flying in the sky, so that is a bird, and here comes a plane will pass through, it's flying on the sky, and so the kid will like call it like, yeah, there's a bird. And so you will try to explain to the kid that no, that's a bird. That's not a bird. That's a plane. Not all things that fly in the sky are called birds. So there are also plane. What else? Kite, so on and so forth. Parachute, diba? And so that is the pre-operational stage. They are starting to build. They are starting now to acquire language acquisition. Okay, they can now speak. Oh, that's water. That is air. That is bird. That's a plane. So it's this is a very crucial stage for them to learn the basic concepts. And now we will proceed to the concrete operational stage. On this stage, from 7 to 11 years old, we are in grade school, right? And in this stage, we are now having the ability to think logically, systematically, concrete, okay? That is why, if we can still recall, during our elementary grades, we are given activities in our English class wherein we are asked by our teachers to arrange sentences chronologically in order for us to create a paragraph. So we will identify what comes first, what sentence comes first, second, third, fourth, and so on. Because we are already able to think logically, and supposedly by that age, we can think systematically. We already have acquired that cognitive development. And lastly, for the formal operational stage, 12 and up, high school, grade 6 or high school and up, we are already indulging in the abstract concepts, okay? Abstract concepts. We can now define on our own what is freedom, what is love, what is peace, all of those abstract topics. Okay, for this example in the photo, the person or the kid can now think by himself form his opinions regarding this class. Is it half empty or half full? So these are the 4 stages of cognitive development according to John Piaget. What's the implication or how this theory could help us in our educational system or in our profession? So of course, considering the 4 stages, we have now the idea that when giving activities, we should consider what stage are our students in. What stage are they in as of this moment according to their age? We cannot give them with activities that are not suited for their ages. We cannot give abstract activities to those students who are in pre-operational stage, to the kindergarten students, so on and so forth. And we cannot keep on giving them sensory motor activities. We cannot keep on giving sensory motor activities to the students who are already in the formal operational stage, because that's not what they need. They need activities that will further develop their cognitive ability. Okay, so again, the 4 stages of cognitive development. And you may read this one by your own. And we have here examples of cognitive games in the classroom. What are those activities that we can give to our students so that we can develop their cognitive abilities? And we have this websites. We can use the websites, okay? Educational websites and computer games such as PBS Kids Educational Games, Spelling City, mga sa kaninang bookworm, mga something like bookworm, cognitive fun games, Hungaroo, yung spelling, tapos if ever na hindi siya hindi niya ma-correct yung spelling, so mahahang yung kangaroo. I've tried that one. The Encarta Kids, there are lots of software, websites, and computer games that we can give to our students. So hindi puro Dota, hindi ganun. Okay? Dapat we should utilize of what are the resources that are available that could benefit our students. Next, we have sorting games. We can make use of the manipulatives, like for this one, identify colors and flashcards. Okay? And board games, Scrabble, Word Factory, yeah, so on and so forth. Puzzles, this can develop the cognitive ability of our learners. And now, since we are already talking about the cognitive development, we can now connect to this, the last theory, which is constructivism, because they construct their own knowledge. So constructivism is actually founded by John Dewey. He is the father of constructivism, John Dewey. And now, there are 2 types of constructivism, the social constructivism and cognitive constructivism. So for the social constructivism, we have this theorist, Lev Simonovich Vygotsky, still a Russian theorist. And for the cognitive constructivism, we have Jean Piaget and Jerome Bruner. If you can still remember, or if you have already encountered the in your technology for teaching and learning, so Jerome Bruner proposed the 3-tiered model of learning. So the inactive, iconic, and symbolic. And for Jean Piaget, we have the cognitive development theory. And so what are the principles of constructivism? So when we say constructivism, knowledge is constructed. It will depend upon the experiences, past experiences of the learners. Okay? Through their past experiences, and what they have experienced right now, they try to connect it with each other, and then they will be able to construct their own knowledge. Okay? It's not innate, it's not inherited, and it's not absorbed. The children are active here. The persons in constructivism are active here in creating, constructing their own knowledge, creating their own opinion and ideas. Next, learning is an active process. Of course, learning, active process because they use their brain. They are not passive, they are active. And all knowledge is socially constructed. This is true to the constructivism theory of Lev Vygotsky, which says that there are more knowledgeable others, our teachers, our parents, our peers, that could actually help a person or us in constructing our knowledge, new knowledge. So all knowledge is socially constructed, and all knowledge is personal. Because it is constructed, a person, based on his previous experiences and the present experiences that he or she has, and so he will be able to connect the dots. And so he will form his own opinion and idea, his own knowledge. That is why all knowledge is personal. Then, learning exists in the mind. The constructivists are cognitivists. They are not behaviorists, okay? Because for them, learning exists in the mind. Because learning is constructed in the mind. And now, what are the three main types of constructivism? So we have this cognitive constructivism, social constructivism, and radical constructivism. When we say cognitive constructivism, knowledge is something that is actively constructed by learners based on their existing cognitive structures, schema, okay? And then for the social constructivism, what he or she receives, the learnings that he received from someone, from the family or from the school community, the culture, he will be able to observe it because this is what he has learned from his environment. Social constructivism. This is what he have experienced. That is why he elicited it now, the behavior. He elicits it. No. Okay? He will be able to construct our culture is like this, so on and so forth. And we also have this radical constructivism by Ernest von Glasersfeld, which states that knowledge individuals create, knowledge individuals create tells us nothing about reality and only helps us to function in our environment. What we see right now, there are trees, there are chairs, okay? What we actually see is just to help us function in our environment. So, it depends on what we see in our environment. Sabi nga nila, sino ba yung nagpangalan sa clouds na clouds yan? Sino ba yung nagpangalan sa car na car yan? Sino bang nag-imbento ng electric fan at bakit ba electric fan yung tawag dyan? So, we constructed those terms that could actually help us function, that could actually help us survive in our environment. According to Glasersfeld, we persons, we are the one who created everything in our reality. So we believe that is our reality, and we can use it to survive in this world. And so again, the three types of constructivism: the cognitive constructivism in the mind, social your knowledge is created by you as a person. Social constructivism, with the guidance of other people, with what he see in his environment, a person will be able to construct his own knowledge, to form his own idea. And radical constructivism, what he sees in his environment is, he construct it. And then, yun siya. What is the role of the teacher in a constructivist classroom? So the role of the teacher is to create a collaborative problem-solving environment. Scaffolding, you guide the learner. And here are the features. I want you to read the features on your own because our time is running out. So that's it. Those are the different learning theories that we need to discuss for this third lesson in pedagogy.